Hello, 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 hello. You're listening to Conscientious Conversation. And I'm your host, Will Prophet. I hope your day is going well. I hope you're getting the most out of your day. And I hope there is nothing but positive results from your day. So, in this episode, if you recall, we said that we were going to start a series. There was going to be a series of several episodes that would be centered around, basically steps to winning. And just since that term, as I said, that term is being thrown around a lot, and whether, pretty much across the board, at work, for people at work, and on the workforce, business people, of course, in the sports arena and things like that. So what we wanted to do was, as I mentioned in the previous episode about winning mindset and the formula, winning, all that, what we want to do is, as I said, this is going to be a several-part series that's going to focus around there. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and just get started. So, what I want to jump right on is, okay, here's what I have done throughout my career and so forth. I feel you have to define what winning means. You have to really define what winning means. And so in your efforts to find what winning means, you have to find what it means to you. Okay? You really got to define what it means to you. I've always felt that success is personal. Okay? Success is personal. Because, I've talked to plenty of people throughout my career in different endeavors, and success is personal, guys. You have to, it's personal to you. What's one person sees as success, another person doesn't, and vice versa. One of the things I will tell you is something I do. You have to go ahead and write down what a winning life looks like to you. Go ahead and start, putting forth that effort, writing that down, whether you want to go old fashioned and you want to use index cards or you just want to write it in more of like a journal fashion. You could type it on your phone, or you can, you could put it as a note on your phone, or you can create it as a document or something like that. But irregardless of what method you choose, as I said, success is personal, okay, to the individual. And winning, you have to define what winning means to you. So write down what a winning life looks like for you. So, and I would go a step further and say, when you write that down, don't hesitate. Kind of, go with some of those blanketed things. Go with some of those blanketed points. But be as in-depth as you would like. So what do I mean? So, obviously, you would say, okay, career, what else? What? Family, right? Freedom, impact, health, and kind of go along those lines. So you get those blanketed bullet points, but then go with like some sub bullet points, because at the end of the day, you're creating what you're titling what winning looks like, what it means to you. Okay, what does a winning life look like to you? And so that's why you want to, you want to not just put those main bullet points down, but just go ahead and get some sub bullet points in there, just so that it's going to be more impactful. It's going to mean more if if you're going that deep into it. So it'll be able to give you more direction in the long run. So the other part of that is, you heard me talk about, in the start of this series, the setting clear goals, setting your goals, being clear with them. Don't, a lot of times we have the tendency, I call them these phantom goals or ghost goals, where we say it, but we don't really, we're not doing anything geared towards it. So set clear goals, set those goals to be clear. As I said in the start of this series, you gotta set those, you gotta have clear goals. They gotta be set clear goals. So the way you want to go about that, create a short term, you have there's your short term list where, those are those things that you want to accomplish. I say always go with like a year or less. So there's your, between 30 days and a year or something like that. But always, your short term, anything that's underneath something you want to do in the next week, next month, in the next month, you want to accomplish in the next 90 days, 60 days, 120 days, 181 days. Just put that, all that can go into your short-term goal. And as you put together that, those are those things, and be realistic, stay on point. They're short-term goals. You don't need to bite off more than you can chew, but let with those short-term goals, be clear about them. Like I've said before, you don't have, goals might change, or you might add a goal, or you might delete a goal, or you might expand on a goal. So it might start off, with 1 and 2, and then obviously you add to it. So that's the other part of that. Be clear with the goals and start off short term. Short term, as I said, is anything under a year. So that would be your short term goal. But you should also set your long term goals. Now, there's always been, depending on who you talk to, who you're listening to, there's always been a difference of opinion about long-term goals. Okay, long-term goals. I don't necessarily consider a long-term goal as like the same thing as a bucket list. A bucket list, usually a bucket list is some, you're trying to get something done before an expiration date, or before something's gone, or before someone's gone. But long-term goals, me personally, I feel like anything that's, above a year can be considered a long-term goal. Now, most people, most of the people out there will say 5 to 10 years is the window for long-term goals. I feel like that, I feel like anything above 3 years, I feel like even 3 years is a long-term goal, depending on, obviously as you're setting your goal, if you're, here you are in, for example, 2026, and if you say, well, I want to finish this by 2030. Let's say, for example, you want to finish school. I want to finish school by 2030. That's a long-term goal, and it's realistic, because obviously if you start school here in 2026, depending on what you're trying to get. If you're trying to get you're trying to get your bachelor's degree or something like that, then okay, and you're just starting, okay, then that now it's realistic. So obviously, there's a prime example of where your long-term goal doesn't necessarily fit in that 5 to 10 years. You don't have to go 5 to 10 years. It's shorter. It's 4 years. So that could go into your long-term goals. I always, again, baby steps. I've always especially when it comes to those big goals. And those big goals, I think you have to break those down. I should say, I don't think I know. You have to break those down, guys. You have to break those goals down because, if not, they have the tendency to stall or stagger or any of that because, it's the way that, it's the way by which, especially if you still got a life to live, right? And you still got others in your life and whether you're working or going to school or, so, you break those down into, to the smaller, actionable, accomplishable, goals. A lot of times you find that if you can take that goal, even what I just mentioned about going to school, you might say, hey, I want to finish by 2030. But obviously, if you just follow the traditional route and you're pursuing a bachelor's, you're gonna say, okay, but you could if you're willing to make a sacrifice. For example, if you're willing to take even classes in the summer, you're willing to pick up summer semester each year. Well, you could shorten that time, because remember, it's not so much about the years as much as it's about the credits, and so obviously you need, a certain amount of credits to accomplish that. So that, there's again where you could say, hey, by me sacrificing taking some summer classes, that's going to help you. That's going to help you move that goal along. You're still doing it in smaller steps, but it's going to help you move that goal along, which, still falls within line with that long-term goal. The other thing is, build, the discipline, the one that everybody pretty much hates. Build strong discipline. A lot of times when I speak at different events or different workshops, individuals that I work with directly or in a group, you got to understand, that a lot of times motivation fades, guys. I mean, guys like me that are speaking to you and in the moment that you hear it, in the moment that you hear something that motivates you or something that inspires you, within that time, a lot of times, a lot happens. So from the time you hear it, and you might be really excited and really motivated once you hear it, but to maintain that, to have that, that motivation, that hearing it for the first time, or that it aligning with with the steps that you're taking, that right at that moment, it's great. But remember, motivation fades, but discipline keeps you moving. Okay? And so that's where, that's why discipline is so important. I tell people, as much as that word, no one wants to hear that word. No one wants to hear that word because it's everyone associates that word with, you have to follow the rules, or you did something wrong. Now you gotta be disciplined for it, or now you gotta go through, the discipline of it. Even at the younger, to my younger listeners, you did something wrong, you stayed out late, now you're grounded, or you didn't do your your homework or something, and now, but that's not really what I'm getting at. I'm talking about that discipline is what's going to keep you moving, because you hear the words, just like here with the show, you could go back and listen, and like I said in the episode before, sometimes you go back and you look at something, you might have watched a movie or something 100 times, but then, you go back and look and you get something else. Oh, you didn't notice this, the The other 100 times that you watched it, now here on the 101 time, now you're seeing that. So you got to be disciplined. You want to keep it moving, even though that motivation might fade. And so go back and re-listen to the episode, or take notes and write it down. Even to the point to where one of my listeners said they'll listen to the show and they listen and they'll take some notes, and then from the notes they'll take parts of the note, like a sentence or two that stood out from those notes they took, and they'll put that sentence on an index card, or they'll put that sentence on they'll print it out, and they'll put it on their bathroom mirror. One young lady told me that she heard something that I said in one of the episodes, and she didn't have anything to write with, so she was in the restroom when she heard it at home, and so just so she could remember it really quick, she wrote it on her bathroom mirror with lipstick. And then, obviously later, I'm guessing later she took it and she didn't leave that there. Later she put it on a piece of paper or what have you. But, that's okay. That goes back to sometimes, those actionable steps, So it's okay to hear something, okay, listen to it, hear it, take notes from it, and then, pick out of that what you want to hang on to, that motivating word or that motivating phrase or that motivating sentence. And that's going to help with the fade too. That's going to help with the motivation fading too. And the discipline to do that. Each one of those steps take discipline. One, it takes discipline to listen. Then it takes discipline to hear it. And then it takes discipline to go that extra step and say, I'm going to write it down. And then obviously, it takes more to have the discipline to go back and use that, use that information as a point of reference and as that motivation fades. But remember, motivation fades, but discipline keeps you moving. So that's another phrase of mine that I use a lot. Keep it moving, no matter what, keep it moving. It should, long as you keep it moving, it can't stall out on you, but, yeah, you want to also stick to habits, even when you don't feel like it. And that's what I'm getting at when I said, if you start to create a habit by where you listen, then you hear, and then let's say you say, I'm going to take notes from what I listened and I heard. I'm going to take notes from that. And then now you take information from those notes, and that becomes, the sentence or the phrase that you make part of your life. You have to do it even when you don't feel like it. It's like, a colleague of mine is he is a physical therapist, as well as he is a physical trainer, a fitness trainer. And that's, when most of his clients, there's a lot of times where the client doesn't feel like it. And no, the routine is the routine, the process, and a lot of times if Monday, for example, is the day that you work on your legs, then let Monday be the day you work on your legs. If Tuesday's the day you work on your upper body, if Wednesday's the day you work on your glutes, whatever. The reality is you should, you should stick to the habits even when you don't feel like it. Especially, how about that? Especially when you don't feel like it. Because that's the discipline. That's that discipline. You could even pull, I'll share this with you. You could even pull direct adrenaline from that. Okay. Because that's you willing to push past. And a lot of times that's the separation. That's the separation. You know, most people, oh, I don't feel like it. You know, and that's kind of the you know, especially as adults. As adults, we, you know, it's not like when you were, you know, when you were a child or younger and your parents told you were doing something and you had to do it. So some of those things, as much as we argued with our parents about them, guess what? We did it, and you know what? We felt better after we did, you know, and I mean, you know, it to each is his own, but like I said, stick to the habits even when you don't feel like it. That's very important to build strong discipline. The other part is, I always, you know, all this is, you know, so centered around what I do and how you take it and make it your own. But I will tell you this also. I always start off with a plan. I start my day pretty early. Always have. I always wake up with a plan. I never wake up without a plan. I don't just, you know, I don't just wing it and, you know, and hope and, you know, no. I start my day with a plan. I wake up with a plan, and don't just make a plan. Don't just make this punch list or laundry list of all the stuff you want to try to accomplish. You could make the list, but be clear. Just like I said, be clear about your goals. Be clear when you do that list. So have a clear top 3, right? Top 3 to 5 that are your priorities. Those are these are the 3 that you're definitely getting done today. You know, sometimes we have the tendency we put together, oh, I want to do this, and you put, you know, you realize there's only 24 hours in a day, and you say, oh, I'm gonna get these, 25, 30 things done. Well, you know that, you know, it's very unlikely you're going to get all that done in a day and get it done right. So yeah, just be precise about, just as clear as you are about your goals, be clear about your daily plan. And like I said, prioritize, 3 to 5 of the things on that laundry list or punch list. This will keep you focused. Okay. And it keep you focused, and a lot of times, see, if you don't do this, what happens is then you're just reactive. You're just reacting to everything. Everything is just your reaction to what comes at you. And the problem when you're doing that is every time something new pops up or something new comes at you, you're going to immediately stop what you're doing and you're going to deal with that situation that came up. And the problem with that is you're going to end up moving away from your list. And when you move away from your list, now things are going to, now nothing's going to get done, or they're going to get half done, or they're not, So stick with that. The other part of is invest in your health. Spend some time, just overall, whatever it is, whether it's vitamins or whether it's exercising or whether it's, trying to eat right, what have you, spend some time, whether it's for some of us, you might be exhausted. You might be exhausted. Your body's telling you you're exhausted and you're ignoring it. And so, invest in your body, spend some time, if it's a membership, if it's a health club membership, okay, it's worth that X amount of dollars a month. If it's a trainer, like I was just telling you about, associate of mine, there's a personal trainer. If you need to, invest in, just like you should invest in your health overall, whether that, just like, anything else, okay, you want to be around a while, right? The whole idea of you want to be around a while, right? So invest in your mental health, invest in your physical health, invest in it. It's not, you know, it's not just about waiting, for someone to give you something. Sometimes you gotta, putting yourself or taking those steps, taking those smaller steps towards it, it's going to ultimately help. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's exercising, eating right, or making sure you put some water in your diet. A lot of us, we're guilty of that, between the iced coffees, a regular, or if you're a hot coffee drinker, or, and all the little, energy drinks and all the things to drink out there. A lot of us forget the main thing that we should be drinking is water, and our body should be, taking in that water, because here's what you're going to find. The reason why I'm saying this is because if you don't invest in your health, you're going to find it harder to succeed. There is a certain part of your success, is that, and you're going to find that the success is harder. The success is harder. This is something that's, your health is part of you, your body's part of you, your mind's part of you. So these are things that you should be investing in and being willing to invest in for a better you. The other real big one for me, and what I tell individuals all the time, is keep learning. You heard me touch on this a little bit at the start of this series, the episode that started this series. Keep learning. I love sharing the quote from Bill Gates. The quote from Steve Jobs, where he said, "Stay foolish." And I always say, I translate that into keep learning. Whatever it has to do. Read a book, take a course, listen to the podcast, listen to a show, you keep learning, learn a new skill, just continuously keep learning. The idea, it keeps you. Here's the thing: when you keep learning and you're always willing to learn, like you hear me talk about every day, learn something new. It keeps you valuable and adaptable. Okay, especially like in this day and age where all this new technology's coming out, all this new stuff kind of coming out. If you keep learning, you're not so. It's interesting because if you're always, whether we're talking telecom or we're talking, a different industry or whatever, if you're, as I said before, on an episode, that's one of the reasons why, organizations like the Realtors Association and different other professional organizations, accounting, people that are accountants, lawyers, they got those continue ed classes. They got those where, something might have changed, or a new technology might have came out, or a different way of doing something that you were already doing. So keep learning, because like I said, that it's going to make you valuable, because it's going to, regardless of your age, when you know what it is, a lot of times people find it like a badge of honor not knowing something. Oh, I don't know anything about that, or I never heard of that. Well, it's not a good thing. You know what I'm saying? Especially if it's something that's out there in the forefront. You understand? I mean, that the old saying is, where you been, under a rock? You don't know this is going on. You should always try to keep learning, because like I said, at the end of the day, that's going to make you valuable, and it's going to be, and make you adaptable, which is key to, which falls in line with growth and all of that. Oh man, here's the, for me, I'll tell you, time management. Manage your time wisely. That's one that took me some time, uh, coming up as a young man, and coming up throughout my career in school and so forth. Just being on time, whether we're not just being on time for class and to get to work and stuff like that, but just manage your time wisely. Sometimes we look and we know doggone well, right, that it's going to take us an hour to do something, but for some reason we look at the clock and we see, oh, I only got 30 minutes, but we think we're going to go and do that that thing that's going to take us an hour, that we know is going to take us an hour. We think we can do it in 30 minutes, or a lot of times starting a project when you don't have when you don't know you don't have enough time. Manage your time wisely. Manage your time wisely. Use. You could. I mean, and look for things to help you do that. If you need to buy I know it might seem a little outdated with tablets and cell phones, but if you need to buy yourself an old-fashioned paper calendar and put it up on the wall or stick it to your fridge, if you need to print out or write out an actual to-do list, to help you with your time. Remember, that's that precious asset. Focus on those important tasks. As when you do these things, make sure you're focusing on those important tasks, instead of just the urgent, distractions. Where you're sitting here and you're, focus on those important tasks, and a lot of times, those urgent distractions are just, they're just what they are. It's a difference between being busy and looking busy, right? And it's a difference between accomplishing something and as you've heard me say, half accomplishing something. So stick with that. Stick with that that side of it. Manage your time wisely. Protect your time. Manage your time wisely. And then you know what? Last but not least, I would say it goes back to that, what I talk about all the time: development of and growing that mindset, developing and that development of growing your mindset. You gotta have, and I feel like you have to have faith. You gotta have belief in your skills. Okay, you know, in your skills once you learn something. Don't second guess yourself. You can improve, but again, it's effort. A lot of this stuff comes down to effort, and you've heard me talk about how mistakes are the learning opportunities. And so don't always see it as the negative, or it's bad, or it's, so again, I hope as you follow this particular series, I hope that you are, taking, writing it down, kind of making it a point to find out, to find out how some of this will apply to you and how you can use it in your day-to-day life. So we'll pick up, in the next episode, we'll pick up where we left off at. And, when we do that, we'll start, I will go into, how to go about choosing the right environment, because it's about it being the right environment, but not just so much it being the right environment, but the right environment for you. So, you've been listening to Conscientious Conversation. I'm your host, Will Prophet. I hope you got something out of this, the first part of this series. And, I want you to go and continue on your day. Take the information that you have, and let's continue to follow. Follow us on social media, and continue to follow the upcoming episodes. As I said, we will pick up in the next episode, we'll pick up in choosing the right environment and how that applies to you.